This is Cross Culture Podcast with Belle Tyndall and Lauren Windle,
where we talk pop culture and current affairs from a Christian perspective.
We are back. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, it's been, well, because we did our conspiracy theory special last week, I feel like it's been a while since we've actually caught up on like the goings on.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, it took us a good week to climb out of those rabbit holes we fell deeply into.
Well, because I posted it on Instagram as well, and then loads of people had their own theories, I got even deeper afterwards. And then when it came out, more people are messaging me, people have sent me new conspiracy theories. There's probably a follow-up somewhere in our midst.
Yes, because my natural question is, did anyone bring one up that is even more fun than the ones we spoke about?
Oh, the Banksy in Bristol, where you're from, is actually Neil Buchanan from Art Attack.
Wow, that's a really good one. That's excellent.
Like, I would love that to be true.
Yeah,
you know?
I really would too.
That would be brilliant.
But in my head, I don't know if you're like this, in my head, Banksy is like early 30s, super cool, majorly edgy. So when people come at me and they're like, Belle, don't be silly. He's obviously like 50s, 60s, something like that.
Well, he will be 50s now because he started. I remember there being a Banksy in Brighton when I was studying and I was 19. So that's 2 years ago. No, that's 17 years ago. And he was known and a thing then. And I remember my ex-boyfriend, the boyfriend I was dating at that time, had the Banksy book, the like black and white one with the. So that book has got to be 20 years old. So
I know.
30 when he started. He is in his 50s now, right?
This is the thing, but he's ageless to me, so I just don't want to know.
I picture him wearing Carhartt and a cap of some kind.
Well, he is a Bristol lad.
Yeah, I feel
and
like
that is the uniform.
Carhartt is the uniform of Bristol.
It very much is.
Right, but so since the last time we talked about current affairs, there's been a lot in Christian news, particularly Justin Welby has announced that he's standing down, with people calling for him to stand down over allegations of a cover-up of not making the right decisions around a now passed away clergyman who was abusive towards young boys, right? Now, this is a funny one. I don't want to talk about it. And if this was like a podcast for another thing, then we would probably have to. But we don't, because this is our show. So like, I mean, look, at me if you want, but I'm kind of going to duck it. And obviously, Belle, your full-time job is working for the Centre for Cultural Witness, which comes under the umbrella of Lambeth Palace. So I don't know what you're able to say or whatever, but I'm just going to free you from the obligation to make any comment. Like, what I can say is that you couldn't pay me to have any level of power. People make bad decisions. People make good decisions. I have the utmost care and respect for people who have been affected by situations of abuse. I think that there are no winners in these kinds of scenarios. My experience of Justin Welby is that he is a man who wants the best for people and a man who wants to do things really well. I mean, I'm a person who wants to do things really well. Give me any kind of authority or power or difficult choices to make, and who knows if I'll get them right. So that's it. I kind of just want to leave that there. I don't know if you comfortable with me leaving that there? Like,
I love that you've left that there. Who's going to tell us off?
To comment on it? Yeah, we are our own bosses.
We're adults.
I don't feel like we have to. Have to pick everything apart if we don't want to. I just feel desperately sad about the whole thing, you know.
Me too.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, very sad. Seeing as we're not speaking about that, can I move us on to a different prior archbishop?
What's your favorite prior archbishop?
Right, please, because I only know one. So
you can't just know one.
I only know one. There's only one in living memory for me. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, okay, but I've read Wolf Hall, so I really like. What's the Archbishop of Canterbury from? Thomas
Cromwell.
Is it Cromwell or is it Cromwell?
No, I think I've just made myself seem really silly.
Cranmer. Thomas Cranmer. But it's
Yeah,
really
of course.
close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Cromwell is a very separate, very famous man, and I can't believe I've just told
Thomas
the
Cromwell did his
nation
own thing. Yeah.
that Thomas Cromwell was Archbishop of
I've not
Canterbury.
actually watched Wolf Hall.
Nor me.
Maybe okay, that's maybe something to talk about in the future
There you go.
because
Yeah.
Wolf Hall dramatization is now coming out, but I tend to wait until things are out in whole rather than being dripped and drabbed weekly.
I haven't got the patience for a weekly dose of anything these days.
Yeah. Anyway, from Hilary Mantel's description, I'm quite a fan of Cranmer, but tell me which one you were going to talk about.
Oh, I
Oh, oh
adore Rowan
yeah.
Williams. I love him very much. I read everything he does. I think he's amazing. And my one Rowan Williams story is that I am from Wales, used to live in Cardiff. He too is from Wales and does live in Cardiff, but also works in London often. And I was on the train home, and who should come and sit next to me on the train
No.
back to Cardiff
No.
but the Right Reverend Rowan Williams.
Did you speak to
Mad.
him?
Yeah, but it took me ages. I had to text my boss, who is also a bishop and knows Rowan Williams very well. So I had to text my boss and be like, I'm sat next to Rowan Williams. What do I do? And my boss, Graham, just texted back saying, say hello.
Wait, but have you interviewed Rowan Williams? Has he ever come on
No.
your other podcast?
No,
No.
I have never
Okay.
had any professional interaction, just pure
Ooh,
coincidental interaction. And let me
okay.
tell you, he's one of the best people I've ever met. He came, I was very much in a standard seat. He was not in first class, he was in standard class. He had this big, old, chunky laptop that looked like it was from the early noughties in a
Oh,
Tesco's bag for life.
okay. That's not a good way to protect your laptop, Rowan.
I know, but just how beautifully understated, right? And obviously he's quite distinctive looking. If you've never seen him before, Google him and then you'll never forget the face, right? He's quite distinctive looking. And so obviously everyone on the train knew who he was. And he was just so chill, so gracious,
I
just like,
don't think
hey,
everyone on the train would know who he was. He is distinctive looking, but I don't think the general public can recognize archbishops.
do you think? I don't know. He did like a few famous things, didn't he? Weddings and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
he's in The
maybe.
Crown.
Who played him in The Crown?
I don't know. Someone who looks oddly like him played him in The Crown.
That's so good. I'd say Nick Cave is probably, to me, more striking looking,
Yeah,
but
well, imagine them
he's
together because they are pals. Imagine seeing those two men
hey,
walk down the street.
caricatures of themselves.
Absolute caricatures. Anyway, as you can just imagine how delighted I was to see that Rowan Williams had been commissioned to write something for The Guardian, right? Two of my favourite worlds colliding.
Ugh, yeah, go on then.
And it was none other than a review of Jordan Peterson's latest book, which is
Okay.
called We Who Wrestle with God. Whoever commissioned Rowan Williams to review Jordan Peterson's book deserves a whopping Christmas bonus.
Tell me, I have to know what he thought of it. I've got so many Jordan Peterson thoughts. Tell me everything.
Oh, well, shall I just read you the headline and then you can kind
Yeah.
of gauge what he thinks from there? We Who Wrestle with God by Jordan Peterson review. A culture warrior out of his depth.
I've got
Oh,
so many questions. Okay, number one, has Jordan Peterson now formally confirmed that he is Christian?
no.
No, he's still speaking in a sort of generic that Christian
Yes,
wisdom is good to benefit from, but I'm not. Whereas his wife
exactly.
has. His wife has
Yeah.
now been baptized
Yeah.
publicly. Okay.
Yeah.
Question two, in what ways did he think Jordan Peterson was out of his depth? Because is
Here
this like
we
a
go.
theological review then that Jordan Peterson's written without being
Well, this is what Rowan's a bit confused about. And as you can imagine, this is the most elegant ripping apart of a book you will ever read, right?
Before we continue, can I just
Yeah.
say that my frustration, I think I've said this before,
Mm.
is I think I said this when we spoke about Spufford, is that we as Christians take great theologians and then give them book deals when they're not great writers. Rowan Williams is hands down, just in his own right, theology aside, an exceptional, right? He is one of the few, he's one of a
Yeah.
handful
Yeah.
that could turn his hand to any kind of writing. The man has got exceptional talent. I think he's a fellow of the like Literature Society or something. He's
Yeah.
like a big deal in writing as
A
well
big
as
deal.
in
He's a
book.
poet as well. Yeah.
Oh, stop
He's
it.
just, I know.
This is
I
just a
know.
Rowan Williams fan fest, isn't it?
Most conversations with me are. I can't lie. It's where it tends to go. So
And now
anyway.
that he doesn't like Jordan Peterson, I love him
Oh,
even more.
I know. It's just so good. So basically, Rowan's just a little bit confused because, like you've just said, Jordan Peterson has written a whole book based on some of the key stories from Genesis and Exodus, and in
Mhm.
brackets, for some reason, Jonah, Rowan's words,
Okay.
for some reason, Jonah.
Well,
Just how
is his thing from Jonah that he's speaking to? I suppose you haven't read the Jordan Peterson book, right? You've
no,
read the review, right? Yeah. I
that's right.
guess his thing for Jonah could be him sort of speaking to the sort of cowardice of turning away from calling,
I
because
think
he's
so.
very much into like men stepping up to be men.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see
Mm-hmm.
how he might find that relevant for his rhetoric. But carry on, I'm too
Yeah.
excited.
I know, it's so good. Rowan says it falls down in two ways. I mean, firstly, he says that this needed some ruthless editing.
Oh,
Isn't
okay.
that, as an editor yourself, isn't that just a lovely way to tear down a book to say that it
As
needed ruthless editing?
As soon
Oh,
as you said that, I thought, who is his editor and who
the
is the
poor
publishing
editor.
house?
I
Oh,
know.
do you know what though? The fact that it is 576 pages to me says that it probably does need some serious
That Rowan was
editing,
right.
because
Yeah.
that's like more than 100,000 words. You've got to be pretty confident that you've got some good stuff to say.
And here's the thing. So Rowan's a bit confused because Jordan, what is God to Jordan? Is it a highest value? Is he a concept? There's
Mm.
no mention within this book that he thinks God is an actual thing. So it's like, well, what are you're telling us all of these stories about God, but a God that you're not sure what you think of, and that just makes for a muddled book, right? But then it gets even more specific. So Rowan talks a lot about how Jordan Peterson's use of some of these key stories from Genesis and Exodus, etc., are just a way that he's saying and saying and re-saying everything he says usually.
Mm. It's not the first time. Jordan Peterson has form for drawing on the story of Genesis in his sort of
Yeah.
mainstream
Yeah.
non-religious narrative. So I haven't finished it. I chip away at it. It's like something I chip away at a chapter at a time over the course of years because it just really annoys me. But Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, over 10 million copies sold. I started reading, and he talks about Genesis. He talks about the Adam and Eve story there. I felt very frustrated when he referred to women as being the chaos and men as being the
Yeah.
stabilizing factor, and that
Yeah.
sort of being the dynamic between the
Yeah.
sexes.
Also a feature in this new book, so I understand.
Oh, good. He's doubled down.
Hmm.
Because once I was hosting an event, Salt had this platform called Tables where you like log in and you listen into these conversations. So a bit like listening to live podcasts. And someone commented that in the comments, and it absolutely kicked off with women sort of plowing in and being like, "What are you talking about?" And I remember chatting to the Salt guys and saying, "Well, that's just a direct Jordan Peterson quote," and they hadn't
Mm.
realized. So it is, yeah, okay. So here's my thing with Jordan Peterson. Made a decision. I looked into it. And at first, I assumed I didn't like him. And then I couldn't find enough sort of solid reasons why I didn't like him. So I was like, look,
Yeah.
I'm going to read his book. Maybe I've just judged him too
Hmm.
soon. Maybe I'm jumping on a bandwagon here. Maybe he isn't just sort of the king of the incels, like my sort of assumption kind of thing. And I didn't like the book. I thought that there was some stuff that was really sensible in it. Again, like I said, I haven't finished, but some stuff that I thought was just wildly misjudged.
Yeah.
One thing I would say though is that God can take anything and do amazing things with it, right? And there are a lot of men coming to church because they have been encouraged to think more about God and to look into these biblical narratives that Jordan Peterson draws on in their own personal lives and reflections. So,
Mm.
and I was challenged by a church leader who's complementarian. So we're very different at a church that wouldn't have a female lead. So we know we're coming from different perspectives on that. But I like him and I respect him and I've spoken at his church and things like that. And he just said, look, if it's getting men through the door, then maybe he's not that bad. What do you think of that?
I both agree and disagree. I agree if he's getting him through the church doors, is that a bad thing? But then what I'm finding is when they're in the church doors, there's quite a lot of unlearning they need to do. Because I think what they find is the God about whom Jordan Peterson speaks and what he does with the stories is actually a little bit inaccurate. So if it gets them in, amazing. But then there's quite a
But
lot
if
of
they're wedded to the Jordan Peterson narrative,
then it's two different narratives. That's what I think.
okay.
Because also Jordan Peterson, and I can't stress this enough, isn't a theologian. He's an
Mm.
excellent clinical psychologist, and I'm sure he is. There are too many sharp edges to his work for me to want to engage with it on any meaningful level. So I'll just put
I
that
think
out
that
there.
he has been stripped of his right to practice in Canada. I don't know. Hang on, let me check if
Okay.
that's true.
Sure.
But I was pretty sure that he lost his license somewhere. Maybe not Canada. Canada's where he's from originally.
Yeah.
But there are certainly some bodies that oversee people's care that don't think that
Yeah.
he's the
Fair
right
enough.
person to be doing that.
Yeah. In which case, he wears excellent suits. That I'll
Okay,
give him
yeah.
that.
You
He's
know what?
excellently
He's a
dressed.
snappy dresser.
A
He's a
snappy
snappy
dresser.
dresser.
But
He's very heavily involved in ARC. Have you come across ARC?
again, not in any meaningful way.
Okay, so it's this sort of, I think it's annual or biannual conference where people sort of get together and it's supposed to be bipartisan. It's supposed to be the exchanging of views. I think it has ended up being pretty conservative.
Sure.
And also, it's not supposed to be religious, but the majority of the people who speak there are very open to Christian values and sometimes very openly speak about Christian values. But yeah, I don't know.
No. And yeah, I can't speak on what he says on things that aren't my expertise, but I do feel like I have an element of being able to say he's not a biblical scholar. Like
Oh
he's just
no. Yeah.
not. And I feel like I can say that because on a good day, I am one. And
You
and
are
so
one.
I am one. And
Yeah.
that's what Rowan pulls out is he kind of says, listen, Jordan Peterson is working with some outdated commentaries. Like he's
Mm.
not a biblical scholar, he's not up to date. Again, Rowan just quips he doesn't know his Hebrew, which is a shame when you're doing a whole project based on Hebrew texts. He doesn't know his Hebrew. And I just think I mean, maybe I need a bit more generous curiosity, but I think it's
Mate, do you know your Hebrew?
a little.
Can
It's
you?
very dusty and
Okay.
it's much more reading it and writing it, I'm much more confident in than speaking it.
Okay, so if I were to ask you to say
Yeah.
something, that would probably be a bit of a push. Okay, I won't.
But I'm not writing a book on Hebrew
No, that's true.
stories.
That's true.
And nor would I, because my Hebrew is not up to scratch, or I would take a refresher course. But I find this really interesting. And another thing that I find super interesting, and we won't dwell on this, but I just think it's such a model for how to engage in this beautifully, as you can imagine, because another one of Jordan Peterson's things is gender. As you can imagine, he uses all of these biblical stories to put gender back in their two binary categories, which is one of
Mhm.
his real culture fights, right? And so Rowan just says, most serious discussions of gender fluidity do not deny evolutionary biology or sexual differentiation as such. They are asking for a more painstaking attention both to social construction of roles and to the specific of dysphoria. And then he says this sentence that I love: they deserve a better level of engagement. And I just think that was so generous of Rowan Williams because everyone wanted to know what he thought of that. And it was so generous for him simply to say it deserves a better level of engagement than Jordan is willing to offer them. How
This is like,
measured and
oh,
wonderfully put is that?
I feel like I want Rowan Williams to review everything I write because it would make me a sharper, better writer. Not to
Oh,
be published
yes.
anywhere.
No, no, no. Just for your own
No.
personal
I mean,
viewing.
unless he absolutely loved it, in which case Guardian publish away. But
Please.
no, I feel like, yeah, I've got a deep respect for somebody who can offer feedback in such a measured,
Oh.
and there's something very dignified about that.
Very dignified. In which case, shall I just read you the last sentence of this review?
Read me more. Just, do you know what? Let's just
Let's
take
just
some
read
time
the
and
whole
read through
thing.
it, start to finish on this.
Come on. Okay, this is his last two sentences.
Go on.
This is an odd book whose effect is to make the resonant stories it discusses curiously abstract. So, as in, it does the opposite of what I think Jordan wants it to do. And then
Right.
he quotes, so this is in quotation marks, matter and impertinency mixed, in Shakespeare's phrase.
Okay.
He signs off with a Shakespeare quote.
He's just fabulous. Do you think he wants to come round for dinner?
Oh, I would love that.
I would love
I
that.
would.
I might
Him and
start
Jane, his
putting
wife Jane, who is also magnificent. I'll take them both, please.
She's an author as well. She
She's
writes for
phenomenal.
SPCK. She's my
Yes.
boss is her editor, and I think that there's something coming from her soon. So
Lovely.
yeah,
Bring it
we'll
all.
watch that
Bring it
space.
all.
Yeah, I love that. So
Hmm.
I've been reading some articles as well, and I've got one that's pretty challenging.
Please
Esquire,
challenge
US
me.
Esquire, yeah, have published, and this is a long read. This is a 10,000 worder, right? So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
this will take you some time. Called The Invisible Man, and it is a first person account of a homeless person
Mm,
on the streets. So it's a writer who fell on hard times, ended up sleeping in his car, and is now sleeping on the streets. And it is incredibly challenging.
mm,
And just on like a human level, I think it's really easy for us to disengage from the realities and the dehumanizing of those kinds of circumstances. But this writer, Patrick Feely, and I don't know if he's still on the streets. I don't know how much he was paid to write this. I don't know if
mm,
he's still sleeping in his car or anything like that. But it's really piercing. And I don't think that we get the opportunity because the vast majority of people who are rough sleeping wouldn't have the capacity, wouldn't have the literacy necessarily, wouldn't have the ability or the connections to get something like this published. I think it's a very unique opportunity to hear from someone who is in the midst of
yeah.
something very
Yeah.
difficult and very painful. And I've got a
Mm,
quote. If I think, therefore I am is true, we are people who are. We are, and we stand on this ground. If you deny us ground, you're denying us our I am. Isn't that the negation of our existence? We are here, and we are you, and we are yours. And it's like, it's really moving.
that is.
Just thinking about what it is that humanity piece. Like
Mm,
what do we fundamentally deserve? What fundamentally makes us who we are? In what ways have we turned away from people who need those things? And I think, I guess what I don't know is how I'm going to allow a narrative like this and a new perspective like this to shape my actions. Like, am I going to donate to a homeless charity? Am I going to give money to the person by the cash point? Am I going to take some time to read up more about this? I don't know. And I feel like we can be a bit flooded with issues that need support or
mm,
need financial backing or something. But even if I don't do anything, even if I don't give any more or offer any actual tangible support, I just think it doesn't hurt to open up your mind to the lived experience of people who are in circumstances that aren't the same as your own.
mm.
And this is such an eloquent way of engaging with that.
It's so beautiful, isn't it? I have, and I think it is a benefit in some ways. I grew up in a very rural Welsh town, which means that it hasn't always been a part of my existence, seeing people who have no home, seeing people sleeping on the
Okay.
streets. It's not something I've grown up thinking is normal. So I
Mm.
very much remember it probably wasn't the first time, but I was very young and we'd gone. So because we lived on the seaside, right, when we went on holiday, we went to the cities. So I remember going, I know how odd is that? And so I remember going and the first time seeing someone like eat out of a bin and the shock
Okay.
of that. And
Yeah.
in a way, that's a benefit to me because I am not numb to it. And I'm not saying that everyone who grew up with it is, but I struggle with it really deeply and quite continuously. And I
Mm.
think I remember I was having a drink with someone like in a bar, but it was outside. So we were sat on the street and this guy was asking for money and I kind of knew he was coming and I was like, I'm not going to be able to not. So I gave him money and I probably gave him more than I could afford and so was silly. And I remember the person I was with saying, you haven't lived in the city long enough if you're
Mm.
giving that amount of money to that person. And they didn't realize what they were saying, but I remember thinking like, I never want to stop. If that's the case, then like,
Mm.
I never want to get to that place. I just think, and that's such a beautiful piece. I can't wait to read that because even that snippet has like hit
Mm.
me in the stomach. But I think I was reading a book, Gentle and Lowly. Like, if you're a Christian, the chances are
Yeah, I've
you've
read
either
that.
read it or you've pretended you've read it or whatever, or it's on your list of things to read. Dane
Yeah.
Ortland's Gentle and Lowly. And there's this part where he's talking about our brokenness, and he
Mm.
talks about the brokenness of our emotions. And he says what we tend to think is like things that like intense rage and lust, and we see those as evidence of our broken emotions. And he said, what if it's also that we underfeel things? Our
Mm.
lack of emotion towards certain situations, what if
Yeah.
that is more evidence of our broken emotions? And
Yeah.
I've always been really struck by that, like, whoa, our numbness to things. And there are things that I am incredibly numb to. Like, I live down the road from a brothel and I drive past it 3 times a day, and somewhere along the line I stopped praying for it because I'm just numb to it now. Like, so it's not like I've got this down, I've got this nailed, but there's something about our numbness. And I think that's why what like a powerful headline, The Invisible Man, because I think
Yeah.
that's what happens, isn't it? Things become invisible to us.
Yeah, totally, totally. And
Mm.
that's so interesting, the idea that like we are under feeling. I think that I'm pretty sure we said this before, but like we are so overexposed to
Mm.
pain, to hardship, to sadness that you kind of have to pick your thing that will get you. Because if you let every single thing that is an affront to humanity, that is
Yeah.
unfeeling or callous or unkind or fundamentally painful, if you let each of those things get to you, I don't know how you would function.
Mm.
You'd have to literally shut yourself off from the news if you allowed yourself that level of sensitivity.
Yeah.
And what a shame, what a shame to have to anesthetize yourself against things which are so wrong. I did this prayer once. I did the whole like, God, break my heart for what breaks yours,
Mm.
right? And
Sure.
it's like there's just no, I've probably got like less than 1%, way less
Mm.
than 1%, right? 1% would be a massive exaggeration of the amount of pain that God, experiences, or the level of heartbreak. But even then, I felt so much more raw and vulnerable to some of these things that were being reported that it was kind of like, okay, I get it. I'm going to need you to shut that door back up again because
Too
I,
much.
it is
Mm.
too much. It is debilitating
Hmm.
to even contemplate the pain that other people are feeling, both within our society where the pain is sort of what we would describe as normal pain, like, okay, bereavement and grief, which is very real. But then also, you've got like the fear and the atrocities in war-torn countries, or,
Mm.
other things like that. And it's just like, and circumstances that represent sort of an unusual or exceptional amount of pain, in terms of crimes or accidents, or yeah, I don't know. I just can't take it, basically.
I know.
Take
Too
it.
much, too much. You get compassion fatigue. That's a phrase you hear a lot, isn't it? That charities are
Yeah.
saying they always have to counter people's compassion fatigue. But,
Yeah.
and that's a thing. That's a part of our human condition. We will have
Yeah.
compassion fatigue. And so also okay to acknowledge and feel that as well, I think.
Mm.
Tricky,
Have we got anything
tricky,
lighter?
tricky.
We can pick this back up again with. What have you been?
I have a couple
Anything?
of offerings for you.
Oh, hit me. Hit
Okay,
me.
so here's where I'm at. The words of the year, right? We're
I love
ending.
it when these come out.
Absolutely love it. We are ending
Yay.
2024, and that
Yeah.
means that we have 2024's words of the year.
Hmm.
Okay. Cambridge released one,
Yeah.
and Collins have released one, and
Oh,
those are the
they've
two that
only
I've
added
picked
one.
up.
I thought there was always quite a few.
Oh, well, one main one that I've picked up
Okay.
on. So Cambridge have released the word of the year, and it is manifest,
But that's
which
been
go on.
okay. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that could have been the word of the year for like the last 5 years.
Yeah, fair enough. I think what did it was two things. Dua Lipa, who on the Pyramid stage at Glastonbury kind of like spoke into a mic and was just like, I manifested this when I was 13 years old by writing it in my journal.
Oh,
And
some of
then,
us didn't make it to Glastonbury, so we didn't know
sorry,
that.
it's all free on iPlayer, all right? Look it up. Sit there with your cup of tea and watch it on your sofa. And Simone Biles, who obviously did incredibly well in the Paris Olympics, again, put that down
Mm,
to him manifesting her gold medals, his success. And so I think
mm.
those two high profile examples have just highlighted what you're right. people have been doing for about 5 years now. But isn't that
Both
so
women.
interesting? This is what's interesting about both of the words I have to bring up. Very women driven.
Yeah,
Very
I
women
can't
driven.
think of many examples of where men have said that they've achieved something off the back of manifestation.
Oh, do you know what? This is actually really interesting. And I'm literally just thinking this through now, so it might not make any sense. It might be a man woman thing in that if a man achieves something, it's down to his good merit and his deserving of it. Do we, for some reason, think we haven't worked our way into these successes, that there's kind of been some different force that's allowed us to be excellent at what we do?
Or it's that we don't believe that the conventional channels by which we would be offered these achievements are
Mm,
open to us. So we've got to use something mystical in order to sort of like worm our way in there.
right. How interesting is that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
that's really
men probably feel that
fascinating.
they deserve it, whereas women feel that they've really pulled something off.
They've really got the universe on their side
Yeah,
to have
yeah, they've
really
gone
made this
through
happen.
a sort of
Yeah,
sort of spiritual
sure.
process in order to create something into existence for
Yeah,
themselves. Whereas men are
yeah.
just like, why wouldn't I be on the pyramid stage?
Yes, why wouldn't I have just won
Why
six gold
wouldn't I have
medals?
this medal? Yeah.
Why wouldn't? That's so true. And what I'm finding really interesting is all of the articles that are written about the words of the year. They're having to say, we just need to say we have no evidence that manifesting works. Like it's
Who are
called,
they?
yeah,
Okay.
because that's the thing. It's a bit
Then
of a mystical thing that they don't really know what to do with.
yeah, they're affirming that the word has taken off, not that the
Not the
practice is
practice.
legitimate.
That's
Okay.
exactly what they're doing. So
Okay.
it's really interesting. And obviously, as people who believe that other forces, but we would put that down to God and prayer, really aid the details of our lives, it's really interesting to see to see that in its more general form become a bit of a phenomenon, even if
Yeah.
it's got nothing to do with the God that we know.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay,
Love
second
that.
word,
Yeah, go on.
also very woman driven, brat.
Brat. In
Brat.
its new context,
In its
presumably.
new context. So
Yeah.
it used to be like a child that's annoying, a child that's a bit rude.
Hmm.
Again, would we say that's usually it was usually like a female child?
I think in the context of children, you'd use it for anyone, but I do think that sometimes people use it in the context of adults as like an
Yeah,
insult. And then I think it's probably more likely
more
to
women.
be
Sure.
directed towards a woman.
And then of course there were the toys, which I loved.
The
I was
Bratz
always
dolls with
the
a
Brat
Z.
dolls with a Z. I was always more of a Brat girl than a Barbie girl.
I
But
was
now,
too old for that.
oh,
My choice when I was young was Cindy or Barbie, and I was more of a Barbie
yeah,
girl.
I never had a Cindy. So Bratz was the new Cindy, I guess.
I guess.
I
Although
guess.
Cindy just had the same sort of proportions as Barbie, whereas
Mm,
Brat's got giant heads.
massive heads. And you
Right,
could take their
yeah.
feet off.
Oh, I did not know about the
Yeah.
feet.
You take their feet off because like the shoes are in feet. Do you know what I mean? So you
Oh,
could
you can't
fully
change the shoes, you have to change the whole
change the
foot.
whole foot.
Okay.
Obviously. Yeah, so those are the brats of old. It's evolved. Let's say the word is
Yeah.
evolved. This has now got everything to do with the pop star Charlie XCX.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything to do with her and her new album,
Mm-hmm.
Brat. And
Mm-hmm.
so what it means now is again tends to be a woman, although a man could have a brat time or a brat summer as it really
Mm-hmm.
was, but
Mm.
tends to be women. And it's kind of like the anti-Taylor Swift, right? It's kind of like the post Barbie. It's grungy. It's a bit rude. It's a bit mucky. It's a bit
Mm.
independent. It's a bit
Mm.
hedonistic. It's a bit
Mm.
chaotic. And that
I
is what it
didn't
means to
like
be
either
brat.
the color, the green background color of the
Very green.
album,
Mm,
or the font. And I feel like part of it is like, we're not polished. We're a total mess. We haven't needed graphic designers to do this because I can whip
exactly.
this up on paint. And
Yeah.
that is part of my Brat Summer.
That's exactly what it is. And she's got like big hair, like in no way glamorous clothes. The whole thing is a part of this brat thing.
I feel like I've been doing Brat Summer for many years. You know, the
Mm.
whole like not very polished.
Yeah, I quite like it. It's just a good thing now.
Like, yeah, I
I
can just
yeah,
claim it as the new aesthetic.
I
When
feel
really I just haven't brushed my hair.
I feel brat right now actually. Looking
I
at
have
myself.
in this chunky knit sweater and my pajama bottoms and my hair pulled up into a Croydon facelift. I've never felt more brat in my
Never
life.
felt more brat. I agree. Look at us. We're bang on trend, Lauren.
Oh, it's just nice to be,
Yeah,
exactly in the mix for once,
I think so. It's just nice to be what everyone else wishes they were.
Yeah. Yeah,
Brat.
totally.
So those are the two words of the year. How do we feel about those defining 2024?
I don't think they define my 2024, but I am happy for them to define other people's.
Mm,
Well, am I? I don't love the manifesting thing. I tell
sure.
you, Carrie Lloyd just wrote an article on manifesting for Christianity magazine, and I've not read it, but I will do, and I'll report back because
Mm,
it is increasingly a thing, isn't it? So I don't
absolutely.
love the manifesting. And I've been in sort of spaces, particularly female Christian spaces, like women's groups and stuff, where they try and create sort of like Christian manifesting, where you're sort of saying Bible verses or adaptation of Bible verses, and you sort of say them to yourself in the mirror, like, I am this, I am that, I am.
Mm,
And, you know, I haven't quite decided where I stand on all of it, you
okay.
know?
Yeah. I find it really interesting because, so obviously, it can just be a mindfulness thing, but it can also be very much connected to the energy of the universe. So it's like a spiritual alignment type of thing.
Yeah.
And I find that really
That's
interesting.
that's specifically counter Christianity, the idea
Specifically
that
counter
you're
Christianity, but the craving that would lead someone to manifesting
mm,
is a Christian craving. Well,
oh
not a
yeah,
Christian craving, but a craving, a symptom of being made by God, for God, to
yeah,
pray and receive. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? It's like, yeah,
yeah,
the craving, the temptation that's led you to that place is bang on.
yeah.
But where you think you're getting it from,
Mm,
maybe not so much. And that's like a sweet little middle.
yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well, a couple of more light-hearted things that I've been into this week. I went to the book launch for a friend of mine's book. It's not a Christian book. It's
Hmm.
called Boozeless or
Nice.
Booze Less, and it is like a guided journal. So this is Millie Gooch. She founded Sober Girl Society,
Oh,
which
yeah, they're
is
so great.
they're great. They're
Mm.
great. And like just so unapologetically, beautifully basic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the color schemes are pink and they do things in glitter and they just are who they are. They encourage people, to like not even not drink, but to have a healthier attitude towards alcohol. And they host sober socials so you can go to a dance class and stuff like that. So her first book was Sober Girl Society Handbook, and that was great. And now she's got more of a sort of guided journal that talks you through things like sober socializing, sober dating, just sort of general life. And it asks you to kind of ask yourself questions, and there's space for writing, and there's clever activities, and there's bingo
Mm.
cards of things like that you can try and do without drinking alcohol that you'd usually like dance on a table, that kind of stuff like you'd usually
Sure.
only really associate with someone
Yeah.
when they're drunk. So that was really fun. There are some people who aren't Christian but inspire me in quite a Christian way, and this whole sort of sober curious, obviously there's loads of different mini factions on the internet, right? But there's
Mm.
this whole sort of genre of sober curious and sober influencers online, and she was one of the first. She caught the sort of upwind of it, right? But anytime that you're in a sort of movement like that, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of like scrabbling around for airtime and opportunities and attention and stuff like that, and maybe because she is one of the more successful, and I say I dip my toe into that kind of sober influencer thing, like sometimes I post
Sure.
about it, but it's not my main thing. My main thing's like the faith stuff. She is so generous and so giving and so wanting to give other people a leg up. You get no hint of competition from her, and I think
Mm.
even in Christian circles there's something to be learned from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just celebrates other people's success in such a wonderful way, and she is the person she comes across as in her writing, and Sober Girl Society has got the heart that it claims to have.
Yeah.
um
Sure. I think that's how you know that someone's really for their own cause in a good
yeah.
way. Like, because if sober curiosity is what you want to be growing more than your own name, then of
Mm,
course, any person who's promoting it or speaking about it or taking that mantle on is an absolute win. And I
yeah.
think that's lovely proof that, like you say, her heart is her heart. Like what she's
Yeah.
about really is what she's about, which
And
is rare.
and it's totally made me think like, right, when I see someone doing something and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd had that opportunity. I wish I'd been invited to speak there. I wish I'd been on that
Mm,
podcast or I'd, been given that book deal. Actually, no, it's one kingdom,
mm,
and
mm,
I think that is a lesson for me as well, to be
mm.
like, you are where you're supposed to be. You're following what God's asking you to do. So celebrate what God is asking other people to do rather than
Yeah,
wanting it for yourself. I know that's quite a
so
basic
good.
lesson, like
But one we need to learn again and again, literally like 4 times a week,
I know, so
all the
true.
time.
The only other little thing, right? And I
Mm.
love to recommend shows that you can legitimately watch with your parents because
What a
it's
niche.
an
What a
ongoing.
niche you've
I just
offered the world.
I wish that there was a website that just listed them all. There's a tiny bit of like there's nods to sex, but no actual sex in it. Like there's
Okay.
some like a couple of times they talk about having sex. So that's it, right? I can handle
Mm.
that with my mum and dad. It's a new show that's come out on Netflix called Man on the Inside, and it's just lovely. It's just lovely. It's this guy whose wife has passed away after a battle with dementia. He's a bit lonely, and then he answers an ad in a newspaper because an investigative agency
Mm.
needs someone to go into a retirement home to investigate a theft that's happened in the retirement home.
Okay, I see where this is going.
It's just beautiful. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's like the lead is played by the guy who was the lead, who was Sam in Cheers, Ted Danson. So he's been in loads of stuff, right? But he's
Okay.
like an old school American actor. And it's just, I don't know, there's just something really beautiful about it. The depiction of companionship, the humanizing of the elderly in a way that young people can sometimes dismiss them.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just this sort of really fun, vibrant community of older people. And then there's this undercurrent of like a mystery to be solved, which is always, just adds a fun element.
Yeah, of course. It's very Richard Osmond-esque.
So yeah, basically, if you're having a bit of a rubbish week and you're like, what is
Yeah.
going to cost me no intelligence or energy to watch, but give me a nice little boost, a nice little emotional boost, make me laugh a little bit, I think that's the show for you.
Yes. And you can watch it on your parents' sofa, shame-free.
And that is
Shame-free.
often what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
yeah. Or you
You
can wait till you're at your parents for Christmas and be like, hey, why don't we watch this?
yeah. You say that. I've watched Bridgerton with my parents, so I must have a very different level of what's acceptable.
Season 1 or 2 or 3?
Both.
Oh no.
All.
Oh
All.
no. For
Yeah.
those listening, Bridgerton season 2 is probably passable, but absolutely not 1 and probably
Not
not 3
one.
either. No.
Yeah.
How can
So
you watch naked people in front of your parents?
I don't know.
No, 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 no,
Yeah, so I'm
no.
never going to recommend shows that you can watch with your parents because I have a feeling my radar's way off. I will always leave that to you, Lauren.
Yeah, my parents think I tried to watch Only Murders in the Building with them, which is like nods to violence because it's like a detective thing, but not really
Mm,
violent at all. Zero sex. And my mum was like, oh, it's just too sweary for me. No.
fair enough.
Yeah, so that's my measure now. It's
Okay.
like a few too many F words and my mum's out. So
Okay. All right. Not Peaky Blinders then, which is another show I've watched with my mum.
what is wrong with you? Would
I
you
don't
watch Game
know.
of Thrones with your mum?
Yeah,
Okay, I just think that your line is I will watch anything with my parents.
maybe it is.
That's not my line.
I'm starting to question my life decisions, but it's where we are. It's
Maybe
where
that's
we're at.
beautiful. Maybe that's
Maybe.
something for me to work towards, but I'm not going to.
No. You stick with the man on the inside, okay? Oh, right. Well, we have just created an episode that features both Brat Summer and Rowan Williams, and that is an episode of a podcast I'm proud to be involved with. So
My goodness, I am happy to rubber stamp this and call it a day. There's not much more we can achieve
we
now.
can't improve upon this. So
We will see you next week, final episode of the series, and it is going to be our Christmas special. So dig out your tinsel, stick on your Christmas hat. We are going to jingle all the way home.
that could have gone anywhere. But I agree, we're going to jingle all the way home. Not one to miss.